evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Skippy Lowe Looks at Hollywood. Tonight's guests are the legendary film star Janet Leigh and television and motion picture director Curtis Harrington. Now, with no further ado, here's the man of the half hour, Skippy Lowe.
Janet Leigh, looking back over your life, do you have any regrets?
No, and I don't mean to imply that there weren't, let's say, not always happy moments in my life, but to regret that is really kind of denying the experience. I think if something happens in your life that is, let's say, a challenge or an unpleasantness, a tragedy, a sadness, that then, rather than sit and, sort of wail about it, I think that the thing to do is to learn by it. So to say that, that you have any regrets, I mean, there are things that you'd like to say. I wish I'd been able to talk to my daddy before he died, but it's not going to bring him back for me to wish for that. So let's try to make things positive and go forward.
I see. Norma Shearer.
Yes.
She had a ski lodge, Norma Shearer. Tell me about that.
She didn't have it. She was a regular visitor because her husband, Marty Arroget, was a ski instructor at one time when they were married, first married.
Yes.
And then they used to spend a month at Sugar Bowl Ski Lodge, the month of February, where my mom and dad were working.
Working, yes.
And that was where she saw my picture.
I see. Romance of Rosie Ridge.
Yes.
Was that your first film?
It certainly was. 2 weeks after I was put into contract.
At MGM.
At MGM.
And Van Johnson?
Yes.
Tell me about
My
that.
wonderful Van.
Wonderful Van. Tell me about his red socks, first of all. Let's get
He always wears them.
Really?
It's true. I remember reading before I ever went to Hollywood, and I was I used to devour all of the movie magazines, and I had read about his red socks, and after I was signed, and then I had tested for the part, and I got the part of Lissy Ann in Romance of Rosie Ridge, and when I first met him, I was so in awe to meet him, and then I just couldn't help myself. I mean, I just had to kind of look down and see, oh my God, they really are. They're there. Yeah.
Van Johnson, and that was your second picture, Winter.
If Winter Comes.
If Winter Comes.
Walter Pidgeon, Deborah Carr.
Deborah Carr. Good God.
Yes.
Tell me about it. The first time you met Deborah Carr, how did you, and Walter Pidgeon?
Well, I mean, they just were both such beautiful and big and wonderful stars. I played a little English waif, kind of.
Now, where did you get the accent? I mean, you're from Stockton,
I'm
California.
from Stockton, California, exactly. And that's the wonderful thing that MGM and the studios had at that time, was that all of these facilities were there for you to learn from. And they had a diction coach, they had a drama coach, they had singing, they had dancing.
Yeah, they groomed stars.
They
really,
absolutely took, they nurtured you, they guided you, and they
even made your dates.
No, not with me. I don't know about.
Didn't they tell you who to go out with?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
I do know. Well, let me just finish here. Anyway, what they did was they had Sir Aubrey Smith's niece was the one who tutored me with an English accent. But I do know that at times, like I know that I double dated with Elizabeth Taylor a couple of times for either an opening or the Hollywood. Remember the Hollywood Foreign Press Ball, or costume ball?
Of course.
Well, and that date was arranged for, if she didn't have one, say, the studio would
arrange one for her.
Would arrange one, but she was younger, so it had to be a very careful thing,
Yes.
But no, I never had a date arranged.
Janet Leigh, one of my favorite movies. I love this movie. Even Words and music.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney.
You name it.
Tell me-
June Allison, Lena Horne.
Yes,
I mean,
I
they
mean-
were all there.
And that was a great musical. MGM came out with some great musicals, but
Oh.
that was my favorite of all.
The awful thing was that I had always just loved musicals and a frustrated gypsy, I guess, you know. But I hadn't done an MGM musical. I wasn't hired as a dancer or a singer or anything.
But you did a lot of musicals.
Later, yes.
Yes, you did.
But this was an MGM musical. It's my fourth picture, and I'm in an MGM musical, but I don't sing or dance.
But you were a lovely
I'm
darling.
straight, yeah.
Tell me about Judy Garland. And Tom Drake, which you had a crush on.
Oh,
Tell me about
Tom
that.
Drake, I had seen.
You had a crush on him, didn't you?
Yes, I did. He in Green Years, and he had just done so many, and I loved that. He always had a breath when he spoke. You know, there was a breathy quality, and he always kind of, and I just had the biggest crush. And then I did two pictures back to back. I did the Lassie picture, which was my third picture, Hills of Home, with Tom Drake.
Tom Drake.
And Words and Music, where he
Yes.
played Richard Rogers and I played Mrs. Rogers.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And
Mickey Rooney.
Mickey Rooney.
Tell me. You said working with Mickey Rooney is like what?
Well, I don't remember the exact word I used in the book, but it just like a
An
bomb,
explosion.
a bomb
Explosion.
waiting to go off.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he just was such a dynamo, you know. And to see he and Judy do Johnny One Note, and that was
Tell me about Judy Garland.
the first time
you met her.
Well, the first time I met her was on the set of Words and Music, and I remember the day we had been shooting, but this was the day that she was going to come on and do the scene at the party, and then they would do their number.
Yes, the one note.
And I was so excited. I got up. I mean, I was 2 hours early on the set, you know, because I just wanted to be there. I didn't want to miss anything. I didn't want to miss her coming in. I didn't want to miss anything she did. And we waited and we waited, and I noticed Mickey, who as I said was like this, you know, was very patient and very calm. And they all knew what I didn't know, which was that it was during one of her bad times, and you know, she was not well, and she came on finally about 12 o'clock, and wan and nervous, and my heart just went out to her. I just wanted to. I wanted to hold her, and you know, me. I mean, this was my fourth picture, and I wanted to hold her. But I just wanted to comfort her. You know, I wanted to say, "It's okay, honey. It's okay. It's going to be all right." She just broke my heart. But boy, then she started to whatever she started to do. Boom! It was, you know, unbelievable.
But you became friends with her.
Yes.
After.
Yes, indeed.
I
treasure that.
What was Judy Garland really like, Janet? Really?
She was really great.
Was she?
Yeah, she was as warm and as wonderful. I mean, you know, she had her moments where she was maybe lost to us.
She felt like a little girl, didn't she?
I think so. I don't think she ever had a chance to be a little girl. And I think probably I think the love that she missed in her in her life as a child was given to her by the audience, because she said so often that the time when she's on stage, she felt loved, and she felt it was like the people in the audience were giving her the love that she had craved when she was little.
You seem happy today, Janet.
I am very happy.
You are?
I'm a very fortunate lady.
Yes, you are. You keep saying that in your book. You said you are very, very, you were unlucky with love, but lucky in work. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not necessarily unlucky. Let's just say that my choice
Really?
She was really great.
Was she?
Yeah, she was as warm and as wonderful. I mean, you know, she had her moments where she was maybe lost to us.
She felt like a little girl, didn't she?
I think so. I don't think she ever had a chance to be a little girl. And I think probably I think the love that she missed in her in her life as a child was given to her by the audience, because she said so often that the time when she's on stage, she felt loved, and she felt it was like the people in the audience were giving her the love that she had craved when she was little.
You seem happy today, Janet.
I am very happy.
You are?
I'm a very fortunate lady.
Yes, you are. You keep saying that in your book. You said you are very, very, you were unlucky with love, but lucky in work. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not necessarily unlucky, let's just say that my choices weren't always the best, except even that is because the choices you make at a time in your life are right at that time. And depending on how it goes after that is whether it, continues. But you want to talk about luck? I mean, the fact that I was discovered. The fact that at the time I was discovered, because 6 months later, the picture that I first did would have been made, and they were not hiring at that. Then they had stopped hiring people to see if they could make a test, or to in other words, just stock players.
Did Janet Leigh make a test?
Excuse me?
Did you do a screen test?
Not for the contract.
You didn't?
No. No, I was signed. I went in. They brought me in to meet Lucille Ryman, who was the talent head, and I met with her, signed a contract. They signed me to a contract.
That's it.
The test came when when I went to the drama coach, and she gave me the scene, and I read for her, and she had the director and producer of Romance of Rosie Ridge come down. Then they decided to do the test then, because actually the contract was, even though it was for 7 years, was to really make a test.
Yes,
I mean,
of course.
To train me for 3 months or 6 months, make a test and see if anything came up.
Little Women. Tell me, there's another great picture. Little Women, Elizabeth Taylor, Margaret O'Brien.
June Allison.
June Allison.
Yeah. That was fun. And Peter Lawford, Sir Aubrey Smith. I mean, Mary Astor, great cast.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That was a great
Rossano Brazzi.
Was
his first picture.
Yes.
Over here.
Christian Science. Tell me.
Christian Science, I started when I was married before Tony. I was married when I arrived in Hollywood.
You were a Christian Science then?
I had studied it with this man's mother.
Yes.
And I really liked the idea of the science of mind.
Positive, yes,
positive.
I do too.
I didn't actually join the church because I didn't know that I would be capable of meeting all of their requirements. I didn't know that I had progressed that far. But I subsequently have continued with Christian Science reading, and also like Science of Mind and Unity, because religion really is
peaceful.
Is within ourselves.
Within yourself. Yeah. RKO, Howard Hughes. Tell me. I had Terry Moore on my show. I interviewed Terry Moore about Howard Hughes. She told me some wonderful stories about Howard Hughes. But tell me, Janet Leigh, Howard Hughes, and your mother, your father, took out to dinner, in that Chevy of his. Tell me about that. How did you meet Howard Hughes? What happened?
I met Howard Hughes at a cast party for Little Women at Mervyn LeRoy's house. And Mervyn introduced Howard Hughes to me and my date, Barry Nelson, wonderful actor. And that was it. I mean, I obviously had heard of the legendary Howard Hughes.
Right.
But he didn't interest me at all. I mean,
but he didn't want to take you to bed. Was that the idea, Howard Hughes?
I don't know what he wanted, but he sure wanted something that I wasn't prepared to give.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to. All I know is that when if you and I had a date,
Yes,
right,
yes.
and we went out to dinner,
Yes.
suddenly there would be a third place there, and Howard Hughes would show up.
I see. I see.
And you know, all of a sudden I'm doing 3 loan outs at RKO. All of a sudden I go on a date with a gentleman, and we're supposed to go sailing, and we end up on his plane in Grand Canyon.
I see.
And then Las Vegas, and I thought the nightmare would never end. He drove me crazy. And finally, at one time, I said, "For God's sakes, why do you manipulate that?" I hated that.
Yes.
You know, I said, if you want to ask me out like a man. Don't sit there and arrange like, you know. And he said, "All right, will you go out with me?" And I said, "No." And then I felt badly, because it wasn't that he was bad. I mean, he didn't do anything bad. He just made me nervous. And so then I relented, and I said, "Okay, you can take me out if my mother and father go along." I thought, sure, that would kill it. And he did.
He did. And he took you to the
That's the only time I ever went out?
He took you to the Sportsman's Lodge.
Sportsman's Lodge.
In the valley.
With my mom and dad.
And his Chevy?
Yeah, in his Chevy.
I think that's funny.
And that was the only time that I actually went out with him. The other times were all just arranged.
What kind of man was Howard Hughes? How did you...
Insecure. I think afraid that maybe... Okay, you can take me out if my mother and father go along. I thought, sure, that would kill it. And he did.
He did. And he took you to the
That's the only time I ever went out?
He took you to the Sportsman's Lodge.
Sportsman's Lodge.
In the valley.
With my mom and dad.
And his Chevy?
Yeah, in his Chevy.
I think that's funny.
And that was the only time that I actually went out with him. The other times were all just arranged.
What kind of man was Howard Hughes? How did you...
Insecure. I think afraid that maybe he wouldn't be loved for him, that he would, he would be loved because he was a very rich man. I think, also, I think he's a very driven man in what he wanted to accomplish.
Yes.
I think he was a very courageous man, not only in his flying achievements, but, in his I think, courageous standing up to the to the Congress, and I mean, he a very careful man in terms of thoughtful, in terms of if you're working for him,
Yes.
and one who wanted to possess. I think maybe to possess was even almost more than the actual reality of the possession,
You want to really
if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Tell me something about Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis, now when did he get into your life? Now,
I met Tony when I was doing Jet Pilot. I met him at Lucy's. Remember Lucy's?
Was that when
across
you met
from,
him? Yeah, of course. You met him on Jet
from-
Pilot. Is that when you met him? I see.
I was shooting Jet Pilot. I went to a cocktail party at Lucy's, which was across from RKO. And
On Melrose.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I met him then, and he called a while later and asked me out, and we started to go together.
And that's where it all happened.
That's where it all happened.
Furlough. Perfect furlough. How many pictures did you do with Tony?
With Tony?
Yes.
6, I think.
You did 6 pictures with
Yeah.
Tony Curtis.
Yeah, I like. We had.
You enjoyed working together?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It was good working. I think there are
Wasn't
things.
it difficult to work husband and wife to work?
Not really. I
No?
think that you can bring things to a character
I see.
that certainly I could do with my husband that I couldn't
Yes.
do with someone I didn't
see.
know. I mean, there were certain elements you could bring to a character,
yeah.
and the chemistry between the two that you could have that wouldn't be quite as free if you weren't married. No, we worked well together.
Yeah.
He also liked having his leading lady clean his dressing room.
Oh, I see. Psycho.
Yes.
You were nominated for the Academy Award for Psycho.
Yes.
there were wonderful pictures. That year. There were a lot of pictures there. And where were you at the time when you were nominated?
When I heard about
When
it?
you heard about it, yeah.
I know exactly. I was in Palm Springs, and I knew that the nominations were going to be announced that morning.
Yes.
And I was alone in the house with the two girls. Both, they were toddlers, and
yes.
they were taking their nap. And the phone rang, and and I ran for two reasons. One, wondering if that was the call, and two, I didn't want it to ring again because the girls were sleeping. And that's when I heard that I had been nominated. Yeah.
How Hitchcock, one of the great directors. I
Absolutely.
mean, God.
I mean, again,
tell me
I
about
use that word, lucky lady.
Lucky lady.
Oh,
Yes.
look at the people, look at the directors I've worked with.
You are lucky.
Yeah.
You really are.
You bet I am.
I mean, Hitchcock, that's a great director.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the girls were sleeping. And that's when I heard that I had been nominated. Yeah.
How Hitchcock, one of the great directors. I mean,
Absolutely.
God.
I mean, again,
tell me
I
about
use that word, lucky lady.
Lucky lady.
Oh,
Yes.
look at the people, look at the directors I've worked with.
You are lucky.
Yeah.
You really are.
You bet I am.
I mean, Hitchcock, that's a great director.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Orson Welles.
Orson Welles.
You know, and Joseph
Touch
von
A Touch of Evil?
Sternberg. Right.
Oh, God, what a great
And,
classic. That's a cult classic.
Yes. Well,
Matter of fact,
I'm going to do this.
That's Curtis Harrington.
Speaking of great directors,
You know that you
we're
are
right here, but now,
Dynasty,
now there's one thing.
that's correct. Voila.
Now,
From
see,
Dynasty,
I knew I'd figure it out.
From Dynasty.
How's that?
Wonderful.
From
Thank you.
Dynasty, also the Cobys, and a wonderful motion picture, The Games. Remember that wonderful film? Curtis Harrington, how are you?
Very well.
Thank you for
Very
coming.
well.
This is lovely, Janet Leigh.
Yes.
Curtis.
Great pleasure to
Talking
meet
about
you.
great directors. I mean, Hitchcock. Tell
She
me.
has worked with. I told her before the show three of my favorite directors: Joseph von Sternberg, Orson Welles, and Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, you can't get any better than that.
That's right.
And how many actresses have worked for all three of them?
That's true.
She's probably the only one.
That's what she says. She's
Pretty
very
lucky.
lucky. She is.
Lucky.
She really is lucky, isn't she? She
Yes.
she seems happy too. She's God. Curtis Harrington, you are doing right now Dynasty, parts of Dynasty, and also the Cobys with Barbara
Colbys,
Stanwyck.
yes, I've been doing that this last season, the Colbys. And I presumably will be doing some more this next season.
Tell me about Barbara Stanwyck. Working with
Oh,
her. Good
well,
God.
I'm such a film buff, so for me, the pleasure
real
of
pro.
working with this legendary woman,
Yes.
you know, who proved to be every bit as wonderful and enchanting as she is on the screen. And she is the consummate pro,
She is, isn't she?
absolutely.
What do you see as a director when you are from the artist? What do you see when they do a run through for you? Do they?
What do I see?
Well, I mean, would you let them do their? Do you let them on their own? Do you let them?
Well, yes, I always like to let, I always have a first rehearsal where I may say, okay, you'll be seated there and you'll be, I sort of start them and they're starting,
Yes.
like starting a couple
Right.
of horses, and then I let them go because I learn a lot then.
You
and
did.
then I shape it.
Then
from
you shape
there.
it.
Then I
That
shape it,
is-
but I never impose to begin with.
That's
you
what
know.
Hitchcock did, didn't he? I think so. Didn't Hitchcock do that?
He was more absolute in his movements.
I'm sure he was because,
Because of his
he,
camera.
Yeah.
he preconceived his movies.
I see.
Completely.
Everything was written on paper. He always said, I believe this is true, that the shooting of the movie was far less important to him than conceiving it.
It's less challenging.
That's challenging.
Because,
I see.
because
Yes.
the challenging for him
Right,
was setting
right.
those shots on his model.
Wonderful film. Curtis Harrington, how are you?
Very well.
Thank you for
very
coming.
well.
This is lovely Janet Leigh.
Yes.
Curtis.
Great pleasure to
Talking
meet
about
you.
great directors. I mean, Hitchcock. Tell
She
me.
has, well, she has worked with, I told her before the show, three of my favorite directors, Joseph von Sternberg, Orson Welles, and Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, you can't get any better than that.
That's right.
And how many actresses have worked for all three of them?
That's true.
She's probably the only one.
That's what she says. She's
Pretty
very
lucky.
lucky. She is.
Lucky.
She really is lucky, isn't she?
Yes.
She seems happy too. She's God. Curtis Harrington, you are doing right now Dynasty, parts of Dynasty, and also the Colbys with Barbara
Colbys,
Stanwyck.
yes, I've been doing that this last season, the Colbys.
Uh-huh.
And I presumably will be doing some more this next season.
Tell me about Barbara Stanwyck. Working with
Oh,
her. Good
well,
God.
I'm such a film buff, so for me, the pleasure
real
of
pro.
working with this legendary woman,
Yes.
you know, who proved to be every bit as wonderful and enchanting as she is on the screen. And she is the consummate pro,
She is, isn't she?
absolutely.
What do you see as a director when you are from the artist? What do you see when they do a run through for you? Do they?
What do I see?
Well, I mean, would you let them do their? Do you let them on their own? Do you let them?
Well, yes. I always like to let, I always have a first rehearsal where I may say, okay, you'll be seated there and you'll be, I sort of start them and they're starting,
Yes.
like starting a couple
Right.
of horses, and then I let them go
Uh-huh.
because I learn a lot then.
You
and
did.
then I shape it.
Then
from
you shape
there.
it.
Then I
That
shape it,
is-
but I never impose to begin with.
That's
you
what
know.
Hitchcock did, didn't he? I think so. Didn't Hitchcock do that?
He was more absolute in his movements.
I'm sure he was because,
Because of his
he,
camera.
Yeah.
he preconceived his movies.
I see.
Completely.
Everything was written on paper. He always said, I believe this is true, that the shooting of the movie was far less important to him than conceiving it.
It was it's less challenging.
That's challenging.
Because,
I see.
because
Yes.
the challenging for him
Right,
was setting
right.
those shots on his models.
In advance,
Yeah.
yes. And I don't work that way. I mean, I have a very good idea in my head of how I want it to be, but I found a very interesting thing in terms of acting scenes, that if I have conceived my idea right, very often the actors do exactly what I imagine they would do. It's very interesting to me. Like I'll imagine, they're going to cross on this line, and suddenly they'll be doing it, and I won't have to say a word.
He did a great film with Debbie Reynolds. One of the
big
great,
talent.
and
Yes.
he brought her, never Debbie Reynolds on the screen like Curtis Harrington brought that out.
No,
Debbie
it
was wonderful, and Helen.
And What's the Matter with Helen?
What's the matter with Helen?
Debbie is a
Tell-
big talent.
She is, but tell me about that.
Well, it's interesting to me, and you must know Debbie very well from
Yes.
your days at MGM, that
Right.
Debbie has this, at least my perception of her is that she has this image of herself as a comedian and a clown, and that she's very apologetic when it comes to dramatic acting, and yet she's such an incredible talent that, in my opinion, she's much, much better than she seems to think she is.
She is, yes.
Yes. Because she always seemed a little insecure. This was a really dramatic role that she played in my
It's
film.
almost that it's not hiding, but it's almost kind of taking the safe way that she knows she is good at
Yes.
and brilliant at,
Yes.
so that she
Yes.
feels comfortable with that instead
Yes.
of like leaping to experiment. Yeah.
And yet she's capable
Oh,
of
but she's
anything.
capable of anything.
Anything. She is a brilliant talent. And
Absolutely.
a joy on the set.
Is she really?
Oh, yeah. She.
Curtis, you have a plan. I just found out Curtis has got I hear about your new movie you're going to be doing.
A plan.
Madame.
Oh,
Rubenstein.
that, yes.
Tell me
Well,
about
if, hopefully
Okay,
I'm going
okay.
to do it.
Uh-huh.
I've been developing a project to do the last years in the life of Helena Rubinstein, the famous
Oh, yeah.
the cosmetics queen. There's another film, incidentally, that's been announced in Europe about her young years, but this has nothing to do with her young
I
years.
see,
This is a story based on the best-selling novel of a few years ago called Madame.
Madame.
That was
Yeah, I read
written
about
by
it.
her
Yeah.
secretary. And it's a fascinating story.
Who do you want to do it, Curtis? That's all right.
Who do I want to do it?
Yeah, who would you like to do it?
Well, I can't. I can't really say at the moment. That would be indiscreet.
Yes.
Because we don't have anyone set, and if the actress were currently pursuing, if it didn't work out, it would not. You know, actresses like to at least be able to say, "I was the first one chosen for that role."
You never.
Right?
I have never said I turned down this role or that role or this role or that role, unless it was years later, because it's just not a nice thing to do, because just for that reason.
Yes, psychologically, it's very important not to.
It's better
you
not
know.
to. Absolutely.
Janet Leigh now. What's happening with Janet Leigh now? You've been doing a lot of.
I am so busy, I don't know where the time goes. I've been doing a lot of charities, and I have I've been doing a lot of research. I'm writing a novel. And
this is your first one.
That's the autobiography.
There really was a Hollywood.
Yes, and there really was.
There really was a Hollywood.
Yes, there was.
How about Hollywood today now?
There's a Hollywood today. It's different. It isn't the same. Not that you could expect it to be, because it's a different time.
Right.
But sometimes when you go to the new, there's a tendency to negate what was. And that is what I am saying, that there really was. I wanted to substantiate and to reaffirm, to tell everyone out there who said, well, gee, I always thought there was. I wanted to say, yeah, there really was, guys.
It was in the days of the great major studio system, and all that, like she spoke of earlier, the training, you know, that they gave them.
Continuity.
And the continuity, and that they were put into one picture after another.
I'm sitting here right now with an American from California, Southern California. You're from Stockton, and Curtis Harrington, and was born in Los Angeles.
We are two very few of us natives.
I know, they always say
Two
that.
very successful people. Tell me, Curtis, how did you get into directing? I mean, where did
Originally?
you come? Originally from Curtis.
Oh, well, actually, I got in the way some of my fellow directors have done in recent years, like Steve Spielberg. I just went out and made my own movie. I wrote a script, and I raised the money, and I made it.
I see.
You have to prove your talent some way.
Yes.
And no one was going to give me a job as a director since I'd never directed, so
I see.
I took the bull by the horns, as it were, and I
Very good.
made my first film, Night Tide, with Dennis Hopper.
That was your first.
Yes, that was my first, and I raised the money for that.
And how about
And without
games?
distribution at that time?
Well,
And then you
actually,
brought
no,
it to
I did
distribution?
have help. I mean, I had help from a producer-director who has helped many young filmmakers over the last 20 years, Roger Corman.
Oh,
right,
sure,
of course,
yeah.
of course.
But it wasn't his, you know, he does it sometimes with his projects. He was dubious about the commercial prospects of my film, but he still helped me.
I see.
Helped me raise the money, you know.
Great.
He was the key.
Yes, yes.
And then I raised some from a builder, and I went everywhere to get money.
About the games. What year was it?
Games
It's a great movie.
was filmed in 1968.
68.
And it was
Signor?
really Simone Signoret's only American feature. You know,
I
she
see.
did a television or two, but
Just before I close, I want to say Psycho. Tell me about it. How does it, you know, it's a cult film right now. It's big. It's forever and ever. Tell me, how do you feel about it? I mean, when you made it, did you think it was going to be that?
No one knows that when you're doing a picture, what's going to happen 25 years later. I think it's, you know, remarkable and flattering that to be a small part of that that really classic film, because I think it is.